Brian Sims. Please, everyone, welcome Brian to the podium for his speech.
I walked in and I said, Janice, oh God, am I late? I don't even believe in God, and I still said, oh God, am I late? I hope I'm not. My mom and dad are actually colonels in the Army. If you know anything about me, one of the things that you might know is that my mother and father are both lieutenant colonels in the Army. I'm 5th generation U.S. Army. And what it means is that I'm always on time. I am rarely early, but at least I'm always on time, which is funny because I'm both gay and a legislator, which inherently should just make me late as hell to everything. But it doesn't. Guys, thank you, first of all, so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you. Janice, thank you so much for this. This is, I'm sure many of you know that this has been in the works for a very long time. And there's been meeting after meeting after meeting after discussion about how to make sure that Philadelphia could play host to this and do it well in a way that was meaningful for all of you. And I hope that it has been. There was a presenter that was here today at 1 o'clock, a gentleman named Brian Silva, who's a close friend of mine, who is the executive director of Marriage Equality USA, who actually stayed at my house last night. He slept on my couch, so if he was bad, I blame my couch. But this is the kind of thing when I get to travel around the United States a lot. I get to travel a lot, and I'm not a native Philadelphian, and so people often ask me what about Philadelphia first attracted me, what about Philadelphia maintains me, and these are the types of things that I like to talk about when I talk about Philadelphia. How sort of colorful and unique is my really nice way of deciding or talking about how weird as hell we all are. But I'm really honored to be here. Just quickly, by a show of hands, how many people here are from Philadelphia? Oh, good. Please keep your hands up in the air really quickly, if you will, and repeat after me. I promise not to badmouth Philadelphia as a Philadelphian, right? Nobody talks worse of Philadelphia than other Philadelphians. It's one of those things that's like picking on your own siblings. You're allowed to pick on your siblings, but other people are not allowed to. I for the life of me, don't know why it is that we all speak so badly of Philadelphia. As someone who wasn't born here, who wasn't raised here, who wasn't even educated here, I will tell you that this is a city that has both taken to me and that I've taken to very, very quickly, very easily. And not for just the big sort of esoteric representative democracy reasons. I have enough Ben Franklin tattoos probably to hold me over for a lifetime. But this is a city that doesn't just protect me, it respects me, and that means a lot to me. And it, in many ways, is sort of, I guess, a wonderful lead into what I do and what I get the opportunity to talk to all of you about. And for the most part, what I have been asked to talk about is, what will government look like in the future? How high-minded, right? I have spent way too much time in my life watching episodes of Star Trek to really be able to talk about what government will look like in the future without a holodeck. But I promise to do my best. You know, I am, in many ways, I hope, a lot more like most of you than the average legislator that should be in front of you, by the way. And keep in mind that Philadelphia has 26 members of the House of Representatives that all, unfortunately, passed on an opportunity to be with you today. I'm sorry about that. I happen to represent the skyline, the Philadelphia skyline, from skyscraper to skyscraper, with like 1 or 2 on the outliers that are the ugly ones that we don't talk about. And one of the neat things about representing Philadelphia is I do, in many ways, feel like it belongs to everyone. And so when I get opportunities like this to address people who are in from all over the region, all over the city, maybe all over the country, I'm always more than pleased to do it, but I'm also frustrated that you don't see more of my colleagues here. You know, Pennsylvania is a unique state, as many of you know. We lack pretty much all civil rights. That's my nice way of saying it. Right, that's my really nice way of saying it. I'm a civil rights attorney by trade. That's my background. I've spent most of my career fighting for, when I was a little kid, what I used to call feminist rights. I didn't know any better. As I grew older, I knew to call them women's and reproductive rights. And what I've seen and what I've essentially grown up in is a state that, despite being in the Northeast, despite being surrounded by states that have found paths to equality, we have not. And it makes no sense to me. I mean, we are currently, where we're at right now, we are literally 6 blocks from Constitution Hall. We're 6 blocks from the Liberty Bell. right now, where you're at. If you're not from Philadelphia, I implore you, please wander east. Walk right out the front door and just go east, and you will run into the Liberty Bell in about 6 blocks. And yet you're standing in a city that is an island of civil rights in a state that has none. In many ways, it was part of the reason that I first ran for office. My quick background is, aside from being an Army brat, aside from being the son of 2 Army colonels, is that I lived all over the country. My parents sort of rotated command positions all over the place. And when they retired from the Pentagon and they moved to Pennsylvania, I didn't know that I was going to make this my home. Frankly, I didn't know that it was a home that wasn't going to respect me or protect me the way that I thought it should. But as my family moved away, I decided I wanted to stay here. And when I moved to Philadelphia, I knew that I was moving to a city that understood who I was, that understood why I deserved the same rights as everybody else, why I had as much to offer as everybody else. But I didn't know that the state lacked pretty much all of that. If you don't know already, Pennsylvania has not a single statewide LGBT civil right for people like me, outside of municipalities. 70% of Pennsylvania, if I was giving you this speech right now, if I was just talking about gay stuff, like just generally talking about gay stuff, we could be thrown out of the hotel we were doing it in. We could all go over to my apartment across the street from the hotel and try to finish this conversation in my apartment. We could get kicked out of my apartment for doing it. My landlord could say, "What? You were talking about gay things? You're gone. You're out tomorrow." We could be at the bar across the street lamenting what had just happened to all of us, and we could get kicked out of the bar for doing it. That's what no civil rights for LGBT people actually looks like. My housekeeping matter, if you'll forgive me a moment, I always assume everyone knows what LGBT means, right? We're all liberal as shit. We're all the same thing, right? Yeah, I have a mouth like a truck driver, if that's a problem. I already explained my parents were Army colonels, too damn bad. LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. I hear transgendered a lot. There is no such a word. It's like saying gayed or lesbian. Some days I'm kind of gayed, and I understand. But I was giving a speech a couple of years ago at the University of Pittsburgh. I had all the athletes in front of me, about 6,000 athletes in front of me, sitting there hitting on the soccer team so that the girls' softball team could watch. And I was talking about the LGBT community, and this young woman raised her hand and she said, I'm so frustrated that you're leaving me out of this discussion. And I remember thinking, well, I do this for a living, so I must be right and you're wrong, which clearly meant she was right. And she said, it's actually the LGBTQQIAAP. Right? Oh, shit. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, queer, questioning, intersex, allied, asexual, and pansexual. My mom calls us the ABS community, all but straight. Right? How's that? How's the ABS community? Like, Mom, we're fabulous. Thank you so much. Oftentimes when I talk, I want to be very clear with people that generally what I am talking about when I say the LGBT community is the larger LGBT, LMNOQ communities. I mean everybody. But when I talk about policy, when I talk about legality, when I talk about the work I do in the Capitol, I generally just mean the LGBT community. I generally mean people that are specifically denied rights or they are shielded from rights because they identify themselves as lesbian or gay, oftentimes bisexual, and every time transsexual. And so I don't want people to think when I say LGBT that I'm leaving them out. I promise that I intend to include you, but oftentimes I really mean those people that are most specifically picked on because of their civil rights. So I got asked to talk about what politics is going to look like in the future. And I have spent months thinking about this question from a whole bunch of different vantage points. First and foremost, my family is all Republican. How about that? Right? How the hell did they raise this raging, flaming Democrat? I don't know. I remember when I came out of the closet, I was 20 years old, my father sat me down, an Army Colonel, Southern Baptist Republican doctor, right? He should have horns and a tail. And my dad sat me down and he says, Brian, great Southern accent, he says, Brian, I just don't think I could vote for a party that thinks one of my sons is less valuable than the other. Right? And I remember thinking, like, wow, what a dadly thing to say. Like, I want that on a t-shirt, and I'm going to share that with every other gay kid I've ever met in my life. But thank you. And I meant it. I remember thinking, wow, you've given up a party that you have voted for your entire life in order to support your son. And the truth of the matter, as I've gotten older, I've realized how much I didn't want him to do that. This sounds really strange, but as I've been a legislator now, just about 2 years and 2 months, and some days I tell people I've been in office for about 6 seconds, and it feels like that. You know, Pennsylvania was the second largest state in the country that had never elected somebody openly LGBT before. Second largest state in the country, and here we are in the Northeast. Sometimes I even think of us as a New England state, even though I know we're not, but we were up here in the Northeast, and we had never elected somebody openly LGBT. Now, openly is the operative word. If you've ever been in the capital of Pennsylvania, there's way too much gilding and marble and not to have had gay people for all time. But nobody out. Nobody out. And that's the critical part. That's the critical component to this. We have been studying what representative democracy looks like for well over 200 years. No question about that, right? The United States, well, I think everybody agrees, regardless of your ideology, regardless of where you fall on a political spectrum, you agree that the United States is the best living embodiment of the experiment that we call democracy left in the United States. I don't want to be so completely sort of xenophobic about that. There are places all over the world that have been doing wonderful, wonderful experiments in democracy, in many ways better than we do now. But for the most part, when you talk about the longevity of this globe, when we look back anthropologically, we will recognize that the United States is this wonderful experiment in democracy. But like all experiments, some things go good and some things go bad, right? I had the opportunity to spend a month at Harvard last year. I was a fellow at the Kennedy School of Government. All people much, much, much smarter than me. I'm a lot more fun at parties, and so I got along well with everyone. And one of the neat things that we got to study was the divisiveness of Congress. In many ways, Congress is a good litmus test for what the political dialogue looks like nationally. Pennsylvania, probably there's no other state other than maybe Illinois that is a better microcosm of national politics than Pennsylvania. And so for me, being there this entire time and seeing Pennsylvania as a good example was quite a learning experience. But we looked at Congress, and what we looked at was the divisiveness of Congress. How many times in US history had members of Congress been as divided as they are now, right? It feels like we're just in this massively divisive period where all we hear about is the 10% on the left and the 10% on the right. And we never hear about any of us that are all in the middle. And it turned out that was true. You know, I'd been guessing it like everybody else for a long time. And what we looked at was every single vote in congressional history, based on a scale of how right or how left it was, but also how voracious people believed in it. And what we've learned is that 2 other times in US history have the politics in the United States been as divisive as they are now. 2 other times. The problem was this: at no other time in US history was the veracity of people's beliefs so high. There have been other times when we disagreed this much, but frankly, we didn't even care what we thought, let alone what you thought. Now all we care about is what we think, and if you don't agree exactly with us, point for point for point, you are the enemy, you are wrong, you are bad. And what it's led to is this government that we have now. It's a really interesting thing being a part of this government because very, very few people know what the answer is. But everybody knows that there has to be an answer. Everybody knows that what we're doing is broken. When you see polling about US government and state government, and they always are like, 21% of people are happy with their government. I always wonder who that 21% is. Like, there's not 21% billionaires, and so that can't be them. We don't have 21% like white Christian millionaires. Can't be them. They're the ones that probably should be the happiest. But 21%, I'm always appalled by that. What we have is a government that we all agree isn't working for any of us. But things are changing. I'm a civil rights attorney by trade. That's why I ran for office. If you have spent 10 minutes with me or gotten within 10 feet of me, you have had to hear me talk about women's and reproductive rights, the value of women's and reproductive rights, how they are a litmus test for the type of values, the type of morality that we all have as a country. But keep in mind we are in Pennsylvania, where the issues that so many of us care about, the progressive things that so many of us think are just common sense, are not sort of politically, ideologically aligned well in Pennsylvania. If you think because you're a Democrat, you're therefore a good guy in Pennsylvania, and if you're a Republican, you're one of the bad guys, that's not fair to Republicans, and I'll tell you why. The best bill that I can think of as an example was House Bill 818. Anybody in the room that does women's or reproductive rights will remember House Bill 818 for the rest of their lives in the way that I will. My first April in office, April of 2013, Republicans in Pennsylvania wanted to ban abortion, but they can't, right? The U.S. Supreme Court says you cannot ban abortion in the United States. So what they decided to do was to make it illegal for private insurance companies to offer private coverage to a woman for abortions at her own expense, something that she has a constitutional right to do. And 36 Democrats voted for that bill in the Pennsylvania State House. That is more than a third of the Democrats in the Pennsylvania State House. More than a third of my colleagues. You should have seen how pissed off I was.
Why did they?
Why? Because they are pro-gun, they are pro-life, they just happen to be pro-union. And that's Pennsylvania Democrats. I stood up in front of the room and I said, how is it that I am the man that likes women the most in this room?